Wow. So totally learning how to just focus on the solution and not just problems has been a major game changer for me. I have overcame so much. Like whenever I first began going through this like full on sober, not smoking every day, not having beverages to have that liquid courage to fight the anxiety of life. And I started deep diving into this like spirituality shit that I found on TikTok. It brought up so much stuff for the fact of, for 20 some odd years I had been using these substances to escape from these little inner demons, this spiral of doom, these little fears that I had. What I'm starting to realize now is a little bit of self-worth and self-confidence, things that had happened in my past that I kind of held on to without really realizing it. And they were just inside my conscious mind. So I would get super creative and super imaginative with all these terrible outcomes that were going to happen. And so it would totally freeze me. It would get me stuck. And I would have all these great ideas and I would want to do all this stuff. But then I would end up talking myself out of it because of little fears that I had. I call it the spiral of doom. It was like, once I started thinking about something or something happened and I needed to step outside of my comfort zone and like take care of business, whether that was talk to somebody or have a confrontation or shoot, even there for a while, it was little things like making appointments for doctors and shit. It was just this fear. Like, I really don't like talking on the phone. And I don't know why. A lot of it was like not wanting to bother people, which goes into like the self-worth situation of me myself is not really worthy of your time. So if I hit you up, then I'm bothering you and it's going to be a disservice to you. That's just me. That was just something that for some reason, somewhere down the line, I had this built up feeling, these memories from some point that I attached to. And that was what I lived. And that was my fear, was that I was going to bother someone. Like, really, how many people, you call someone and they don't want to talk to you, they mute it, or they'll call you back later, or they'll text you, or you don't hear from them. Like, it's not a life or death situation, but I made it into a life or death situation. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. I'll just go about my way. And whenever they call, if they ever call, then we'll discuss it then. And you can't get shit done that way, right? It's a vicious cycle. And until I started actually realizing what the hell I was doing, there was really no way to get shit done. Like, there's no way to adult. There's no way to take back your power, as they say. You can't wait on anybody else. If you want something to happen, then you have to put forth the effort. You have to put forth the action. And that was a major step that I had to take to overcome that silly little thing like bothering someone if I called them to ask them a question or whatever. So focusing on the solution and rather than the problem, I've realized that whenever I would get into these circle of dooms, these cycle of dooms, these vicious patterns of everything that could go wrong, all the problems, it's where they say that like attracts like. Once you get down that path, you kind of become addicted to it. You get into this cycle and it builds upon each other. So in the version of like attracts like, you're in this momentum of spiraling, essentially. And once you think of one thing that could go wrong, then you think of the next thing that could go wrong. And until you pull yourself out of it, you can just keep on spiraling for days, if not weeks or months, if not years. Becoming aware of that and like pulling yourself out and taking a step back and actually looking into the solution rather, or something that can benefit you, how you can go about the situation in a more positive way, in a more productive way, pulls you out of that doom cycle so you can start seeing what else is possible. It's very interesting to me. I read something the other day about creativity and imagination. For a long time, I thought that I had lost my creativity. I'm like, man, I used to draw all the time. I used to be super into crafts. I really like art and I like being creative. But essentially, whenever I think of like that limited focus, that linear tunnel vision of painting or drawing, I completely lose my creativity. I completely lose where I'm at, and then I just get stuck. But what I read the other day was really interesting. They say that you are creative. You're just using your creativity in the opposite direction. Our imagination is what brings our creativity, right? So think of it this way. When you're in that doom pattern, when you're in that cycle of doom, you're being creative. Your imagination is running wild with everything that could go wrong. So you really are being creative. You're just using that energy in the wrong aspect. You're being imaginative of all these things that could go wrong when we don't even know. Like, I'm not saying that it's not a bad thing to think of the worst. It's always best to be prepared for the worst. But if you're not focusing on the solution, then you're never going to see the opportunities that could be the solution. The more you think about a solution, the more that you'll see different things that could potentially be your new solution, even if you have no idea how you're going to do it. This is where a lot of business people come in. People who have these big ideas and they say, think of your goal, think of your desire. Don't so much think about every step, but think of your desire and where you're at now. And then all you have to do is fill in that gap. Clearly, that's not going to happen overnight. It's one step at a time. You know, you can find people who have clearly went through what you're looking to do, who can help you along the way. There are services of all sorts out there that can guide you, can get you from point A to point B a lot faster than you doing it by yourself. But it's totally doable by yourself too. You're just kind of missing that accountability. You're kind of missing that motivation. You're missing that different perspective of someone who's already went through it so they can give you pointers and tips on how it works for them. But if you are on your own, the best thing you can do is start being open to the opportunities and the possibilities of things actually going right. Getting out of that cycle of doom and start focusing on each step. Something that I'm working on now is passive income. Once I finally got my barbershop open, almost instantaneously, I was like, this is totally not for me. Like, I just don't want to be in these four walls for 24/7, especially when you see all these different people out there making so much money passively. And you're like, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. Or even if you don't think that you can do it, it's clearly been done. And there's so many opportunities. And I got caught up in once you start down that rabbit hole, there's all kinds of different people who's promising you that you can make all this money passively if you just buy their course. And that was something that I went through for a good year and a half too. But really just focusing on what you desire, and then the possibilities will open themselves up to you. So that's where whenever I decided that I no longer wanted to be full time behind the chair, whenever I decided to learn to jump into finances and learn a little bit more about how to essentially make more money without busting my ass, because I have always bust my ass and it really doesn't get you very far. It gets you to the point of being able to survive. But I'm now at that point where I want to thrive, not just survive. So once I jumped in this cycle, I shit you not, like all these possibilities opened up. You can call it the algorithm, you can call it whatever. But I was more focused on finding the right solution, finding a new route where if I wouldn't have even been open to it, then I probably wouldn't have attempted all the different courses and shenanigans that I found. And that's a whole different story that we can go into later. Going off of your actual values and your desires for what you really want. But what I'm trying to get at is once you are actually open, you get yourself out of that cycle of doom, out of that perpetual downfall of everything that could happen wrong, you can start seeing the things that could potentially go right. You can start seeing the opportunities, become more aware of people who could actually help you fill in that gap from where you want to be to where you're at. And a lot of this has to do with how much resistance you're putting on it. When you're in that cycle of doom, all you can think about is everything that could go wrong. So in the beginning, when I tried to actually talk myself into the possibility that things would get better, I found myself being very resistant. From my past experiences, I've never had a position where I could make $10,000 a month only working so many hours a week. Like when I made $10,000 a month, I was working 7 days a week for months on end. And it was a lot of work and it was a lot of grind. It was really challenging in the beginning to actually start looking at it from a different perspective. Something that I really found once I started really understanding verbiage and talking to myself and how I have been talking to myself. I think I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and something that is in one of the chapters is how people who say they can't never will because they shut themselves off. It actually shuts your mind off from even looking at any other possibilities because you just told yourself you can't. And so your mind takes that as the signal that there's no point in proceeding further with this because you believe you can't. So what they recommend is switching the verbiage of I can't to how can I? That way, again, it opens up your mind to actually see the possibilities, to see different opportunities that you may not have ever seen before. But whenever you're looking for something, once you get curious, you give your mind a direction to follow. It wants to answer it for you. Asking yourself, how can I? And becoming aware and just being visually aware and open to what is around you and who you meet. It's not going to happen instantly. You're not going to just have something fall out of the sky. But typically within a few days or a week, like something's going to come up. And then it's your decision whether or not you want to pursue it or not. Those were some big steps that I had to take. Those were game changers. The most simplest thing really opened my eyes up to so much more. And with practicing over and over again, I'm using this in all kinds of steps. At one point, I was having to persuade myself to do the simplest tasks. Like legitly get up and get dressed, brush my teeth, get makeup on just to get out of the house or do the laundry or actually cook a meal instead of doing something frozen. And as I worked myself up, now I'm still on that short-term goal, but the short-term goals are for the long-term goal. So now I just have to get myself prepped and prepared and motivated to do a little bit more challenging tasks, to get organized, to actually make out a list for the day of what I need to get done. I've realized that it's one step at a time, no matter what you're doing, whether you're trying to build a skyscraper or you're just trying to figure out how you're going to save up for a motorcycle. Putting that, how can I, and being open to resources around you, people around you, even just collecting ideas from things that aren't even related, have made a huge difference for me. Something else that's rather interesting that I found, especially going back to those initial fears that I had. When I first started realizing that there was a way to work with your mind, there was a way to reprogram things. Like I said, I got really sucked up into the spiritual TikTok of things. And it wasn't just spirituality, but it was just all kinds of people on TikTok giving their little tidbits of advice in very short increments. And because I was in this mind frame of doom and gloom, of not knowing how to work with my mind in a sober state, everything was coming up that I had repressed whenever I was escaping with it through substances. Everything that I hadn't ever dealt with. The childhood trauma, the adolescent trauma, traumas that I put myself through whenever I was on substances. All these little fears that accumulated in my subconscious mind that I clearly didn't know were there until I started recognizing these different patterns are all things that, like I said, are in our subconscious mind. Everybody has them. It doesn't matter if you had a really good childhood or if you had just the most god-awful childhood. Little things can stick with us that you may not even realize are the culprit for why you do certain things. I was never beaten. I didn't have a bad childhood. But the more that I think about it, there are certain things that I can totally understand why I have issues in some aspects. Like I had a babysitter at one time whose little girl wasn't the fondest of me. And I have to wonder if that's not why I was intimidated by other chicks for a long time. I was also left with my grandmother to live with her while things got situated once my parents divorced. And I was always taken care of. I was never left alone. But I feel like there may be a little bit of an abandonment issue from that situation, just from what my little me had picked up on in that situation. Again, it wasn't anything serious. It was just the little belief of my little brain had attached to the circumstance, to the situation. Now, I am a little bit more onto the factual side, especially since I did deep dive into this whole spiritual side without actually doing my own research. So once I pulled back a little bit, now I'm actually doing research. And the whole inner child is actually your right side of the brain. Your left side of the brain is your go getter. That's your like living in the now and living in the future. It's what sees the opportunities and pushes you towards it. It's the part that sees the opportunities. It's the part of your brain that puts motion into action. It's pretty dominant. It's what we typically live mostly by. But then you have your right side of the brain, which they say is more of your subconscious. This is where they say the inner child comes in. Because it is more of your subconscious, it has memories of the past and it kind of pushes through from the past. It's not your main dominant, but it still has say in some things you do. Have you ever noticed whenever you get excited about something, you see an opportunity and you're all about it. And then right before you go to do it, you end up talking yourself out of it. So that's your left side of your brain showing you the opportunity, getting you motivated, getting you prepared. And then your right side of the brain brings in some past pain, some past memory of something not working out that is somewhat similar to this. And it gives you that little bit of anxiety. And so you pull back and you decide not to do it. This is where they say the inner child comes in. These are past experiences. Most of our brains develop when we're like 5 years old. So anything that's happened up until 5 years old, you're very impressionable. And it's like I said, it's the most littlest things. So if you don't even realize it, this is where becoming aware and noticing the patterns of what maybe pulls you back. When are times that you have decided you want to do something? You found an opportunity that seems amazing. It could really put you somewhere that you want to go. And then you end up talking yourself out of it. Or some fear comes over that maybe you're not worth it. You're not good enough. That is your right side. That is your inner child. That is past memories that you may not even know what are from coming up to the surface and reminding you. It's so easy to get wrapped up in these problems. It's so easy to get caught up in being comfortable and being safe and listening to that right side of the brain. Now, I'm not saying you have to go balls to the wall. You don't have to quit your job to go and become an actor tomorrow. It takes steps. It's those short-term and long-term goals. But you find that solution. And within that, you just rest assure yourself. When those fears come up, it's more of just a reminder of a little trigger, of an alert, of some kind of past memory that scared you, scared either little you, your teenage you. It's just the feeling, the memory of some past situation that maybe didn't turn out the best. But by taking it one step at a time, reassuring yourself that you're okay, and not jumping in over your head, you are truly capable of anything. And this is where you have to let time go. You have to let the time frame go. You have to be okay where you're at. Maybe it's not exactly where you want to be at, but every day taking a step in the right direction of where you want to be at. I am nowhere near where I want to be at, but I have a good vision. And through trial and error of the last couple of years, I know what I don't want, which is a huge sigh of relief in one aspect, because now I know to go in the opposite direction. It's finding what you don't want, not getting stuck on it, and then tweaking the formula to go about what you do want. Things are forever changing. And you can't get mad at yourself for deciding you want something different. But also, don't give up on yourself before you make it. Start looking for the solution and take it one step at a time. I know that's what I'm doing. And slowly but surely, we're getting there. It's like Thomas the Train. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can until you get there. Until next time, bye.